After years of serving in the military, Ethan returns to his hometown, eager to reunite with his first love, Lily. But his dreams are shattered when he finds her engaged to a charming yet enigmatic man, Daniel. Unveiling shocking truths about Daniel's intentions, Ethan embarks on an emotional journey of love, betrayal, and redemption. Before we begin, let me ask, where are you watching from? Share in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Ethan stood on the platform, his heart racing as the train screeched to a halt. The air smelled of coal and iron, but to him, it carried the bittersweet scent of home. After years of being away, he was finally back. As the other passengers bustled past him, Ethan remained still, clutching his duffel bag like it was the only thing tethering him to reality. The familiar streets of his small hometown felt unchanged. The same cobblestone roads, the same warm sunlight filtering through the oak trees, and the same comforting chatter of shopkeepers greeting customers. But as comforting as it was, Ethan knew his heart wasn't here for the town. It was here for Lily. He walked past the bakery where they had shared countless laughs over cinnamon rolls, past the park bench where she had promised to wait for him. His pulse quickened. He wondered if she still remembered those promises, the tearful goodbye they had shared before he left for war. With every step toward Lily's house, memories flooded back. He could almost hear her voice, feel her laughter echoing in his chest. His hand trembled as he raised it to knock on her door. But just as his knuckles hovered over the wood, an elderly neighbor called out to him, "Oh, Ethan, you're back. It's been so long," Mrs. Hargrove exclaimed, waddling over with her ever-present basket of knitting supplies. Ethan smiled politely. "Good to see you, Mrs. Hargrove. Is Lily home?" Her face fell slightly. "Oh, dear. You don't know?" Ethan's heart sank. "Know what? She's engaged. To Daniel, a lovely young man. They're getting married soon." The words hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. Engaged? To someone else? He barely managed to stammer a response before Mrs. Hargrove toddled away, leaving him rooted in place, his world crumbling. Determined to see her, Ethan decided to attend the upcoming community event that Mrs. Hargrove had mentioned. He knew Lily would be there, and he had to hear the truth from her. The night of the event, Ethan stood in the crowd, scanning faces until his eyes landed on hers. There she was, standing next to a tall, charismatic man. Her smile was radiant, but there was something in her eyes, something hesitant, almost conflicted. Their eyes met, and for a moment, it felt as if the world stopped spinning. Before he could say a word, Lily excused herself from the group and approached him. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice trembling, "we need to talk." As she led him away from the crowd, Ethan's mind raced. What would she say? Did she still care for him, or was he too late? Ethan followed Lily to a quiet corner of the community hall, away from the lively music and chatter of the crowd. The air between them felt heavy, filled with unspoken words. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, his emotions a chaotic mix of hope, confusion, and fear. Lily turned to face him, her hands trembling as she clutched them together. "Ethan," she began softly, her voice barely audible over the distant hum of laughter. "I didn't know you'd come back." "I wrote to you, Lily," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. "I waited for your letters, but I never got a reply. I thought about you every day, about us." Lily's eyes filled with tears, and she shook her head. "I wrote to you, too, Ethan. So many times. I waited for months, but when I didn't hear back, I thought you'd forgotten me." The weight of her words crushed him. "Forgotten you? Lily, I could never. You were the reason I kept going, even in the darkest moments. I held on to the hope of coming back to you." Tears spilled down Lily's cheeks, but she wiped them away quickly. Things changed, Ethan. When I didn't hear from you, I thought it was your way of moving on. And Daniel, he came into my life when I was at my lowest. He made me feel cared for again. "Do you love him?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lily hesitated, and for a moment, the silence was deafening. I don't know, she admitted. He's been good to me, Ethan. But seeing you here now, it's stirring up everything I thought I'd buried. Ethan took a step closer, his eyes locking onto hers. Lily, I came back for you. I've always loved you, but if you're happy with him, I won't stand in your way. Before Lily could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps interrupted them. Daniel appeared, his charming smile masking a flicker of irritation. Lily, is everything all right? He asked, placing a possessive hand on her shoulder. Lily glanced between the two men, her emotions written all over her face. Yes, everything's fine, she said quickly. Daniel's eyes met Ethan's, and the tension between them was palpable. You must be Ethan, Daniel said smoothly. I've heard a lot about you. Ethan forced a tight smile. And you must be Daniel. Congratulations. Daniel's smile didn't falter, but there was an edge to his voice. Thank you. It's not every day you meet the ex-boyfriend of your fiancé. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he remained composed. It's a small town. People cross paths. Lily stepped in, her voice pleading. Daniel, can we go? I need some air. Daniel nodded, but as they walked away, he turned back to Ethan and said, with a hint of smugness, some things are better left in the past. Ethan stood there, fists clenched, his mind reeling. Something about Daniel's words and the way he carried himself didn't sit right. He watched as Lily disappeared into the crowd, her hand still held firmly in Daniel's. A nagging feeling tugged at Ethan's gut. He couldn't shake the suspicion that there was more to Daniel than met the eye. And as much as he wanted to let it go, he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't ready to give up on Lily, not yet. The days following the community event felt like a blur for Ethan. He couldn't get Lily's torn expression out of his mind. The love he had seen in her eyes all those years ago still flickered faintly, but it was clouded by confusion and something else. Fear, maybe? Ethan wandered through the town aimlessly, revisiting old haunts in search of clarity. Each familiar spot reminded him of Lily and the promises they had shared. The bench at the park, where she had playfully sketched their initials on the wood, still bore the faded carving, L+E. His chest tightened. He had to know if there was any chance of reclaiming what they had lost. But it wasn't just Lily that occupied Ethan's thoughts. Daniel lingered in the back of his mind, a shadow that didn't sit right. There was something about the man, his smooth words, the condescending look in his eyes when he spoke to Ethan. It wasn't jealousy Ethan felt, but a deep, instinctual unease. One evening, as Ethan walked past the town diner, he spotted a familiar face through the window. Sophie, Lily's childhood best friend. She was seated alone, flipping through a menu. Ethan hesitated before stepping inside. Sophie, he greeted, his voice warm but cautious. Sophie looked up, her surprise giving way to a genuine smile. Ethan, it's been ages. I can't believe you're back. The two exchanged pleasantries, catching up on the years that had passed. But soon, the conversation turned to Lily. You've seen her, haven't you? Sophie asked, her tone suddenly serious. Ethan nodded. I have, but something feels off. I know she's engaged, but she doesn't seem happy. And Daniel, he trailed off, unsure if he should continue. Sophie's expression darkened, and she leaned in closer. You're not wrong about Daniel, she said in a low voice. There's something about him that doesn't sit well with me either. He's charming, sure, but I've heard rumors about his temper and other things. Ethan's brow furrowed. Other things? Sophie hesitated, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. There's talk that he's not marrying Lily out of love. I don't have proof, but people have seen him meeting with a man from out of town, someone shady. I tried to warn Lily, but she brushed it off. The unease in Ethan's gut solidified into something darker. Why would she stay with him if she had doubts? Sophie sighed, her voice heavy with frustration. Because she feels trapped. He's convinced her that she owes him for everything he's done for her. And Lily, she's too kind to see through his manipulation. Ethan clenched his fists under the table. He couldn't let this stand. "I need to know more," he said firmly. "If he's hiding something, I'll find out." Sophie nodded, her expression resolute. "Be careful, Ethan. Daniel isn't someone to take lightly." As Ethan left the diner, a plan began to form in his mind. He would dig into Daniel's life, piece by piece, until the truth came out. But as he walked through the quiet streets, a chilling thought crossed his mind. What if it was already too late? The next morning, Ethan's search led him to the edge of town, where he overheard a conversation between Daniel and an unknown man near the hardware store. Ethan ducked behind a row of parked cars, straining to catch their words. "You know the deal," the stranger said gruffly. "This has to go through, or you'll regret it." Daniel's response was cold and measured. "I said I'll handle it. Just stay out of sight until after the wedding." Ethan's blood ran cold. Wedding? Deal? What was Daniel hiding? As the men parted ways, Ethan made a decision. He wouldn't stop until he uncovered the truth. But confronting Daniel directly could put Lily in danger. For now, he needed to tread carefully. And Lily needed to know that she wasn't alone. The following days were a storm of emotions for Ethan. The overheard conversation between Daniel and the stranger haunted him. He couldn't shake the urgency to act, but he knew he needed more evidence before confronting anyone, especially Lily. Ethan decided to start with the townsfolk who had seen Daniel with the mysterious man. The local barber, Mr. Grayson, was known for his sharp eyes and sharper memory. As Ethan sat in the old barber chair, he casually brought up Daniel's name. "You know, Mr. Grayson, Daniel seems to be quite the businessman. Have you ever noticed anything unusual about him?" Ethan asked, keeping his tone light. The old man paused, running his comb through Ethan's hair. "Unusual, you say? Well, he's always been polite, but I've seen him meeting with folks I wouldn't trust to mow my lawn. One of them had a scar across his cheek. Real rough-looking fella." Ethan's heart raced. "Did you hear anything they talked about?" Mr. Grayson shrugged. "Bits and pieces. Something about a payment and a timeline. Didn't sound like wedding planning to me." This confirmation solidified Ethan's fears. There was more to Daniel's intentions, and it wasn't anything good. Later that evening, Ethan stood outside Lily's family home, debating whether to tell her what he had learned. The house glowed warmly under the setting sun, a stark contrast to the storm brewing in his chest. Summoning his courage, he knocked on the door. Lily answered, her eyes widening in surprise. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice steady but urgent. "It's important." Reluctantly, Lily stepped aside, letting him in. They sat in the cozy living room, surrounded by framed photographs and the comforting smell of lavender. But Ethan couldn't focus on the nostalgia. "Lily, I overheard Daniel talking to someone," Ethan began, carefully choosing his words. "It sounded wrong, like he's hiding something serious." Lily's expression hardened. "Ethan, stop. I know you don't like him, but this is starting to feel like you're trying to find faults where there might not be any." "I'm not making this up," Ethan insisted. "Other people in town have noticed things too. Lily, I care about you, and I can't sit back if I think you're in danger." Tears welled up in Lily's eyes, but she shook her head. "I don't know what to believe anymore. I thought I had everything figured out, but now..." Before she could finish, the sound of the front door opening startled them both. Daniel walked in, his usual charm replaced by a cold, calculating demeanor as he took in the scene before him. "Ethan," Daniel said with a tight smile, "what a surprise. I didn't realize you'd become such a frequent guest here." Ethan stood, meeting Daniel's gaze with unwavering determination. "I came to talk to Lily. She deserves to know the truth." Daniel's jaw tightened. "And what truth would that be?" Lily stepped between them, her voice shaking. "Stop it, both of you. I can't take this anymore." Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder, but it felt more like a claim than comfort. Lily, let's go. We don't need to entertain baseless accusations. Ethan couldn't hold back any longer. Baseless? Then explain why people have seen you meeting with a man who's clearly not here for wedding planning. Explain what kind of deal you're making. Daniel's eyes darkened, and for a moment, the mask slipped. You're meddling in things you don't understand, Ethan. Be careful, or you'll regret it. The words hung in the air like a threat, sending a chill down Ethan's spine. Lily looked at Daniel, her face pale. What is he talking about, Daniel? What deal? Daniel's smile returned, but it didn't reach his eyes. Nothing that concerns you, my love. Let's go. As they left, Lily looked back at Ethan, her expression torn between doubt and fear. Ethan stood frozen, his fists clenched as the door shut behind them. He knew he had pushed too far, but he also knew one thing. Daniel's facade was beginning to crack, and Ethan was determined to expose the truth, no matter the cost. Ethan couldn't sleep that night. The weight of Daniel's threat and Lily's anguished expression gnawed at his soul. He replayed every moment in his head. The masked hostility in Daniel's voice, the way Lily had hesitated before leaving. There was something she wasn't saying, something she might already suspect. He knew he had to act quickly. The town was small, and secrets didn't stay hidden for long. Early the next morning, Ethan paid a visit to Sophie, the only person who might help him unravel the truth. I need your help, Ethan said as Sophie opened her door. Her brow furrowed. What happened? Ethan explained the tense encounter with Daniel and his growing suspicions. Sophie listened carefully, her concern deepening with every word. I've been digging around too, Sophie admitted. There's something off about him, Ethan. A few months ago, he started working with some shady investors, promising big returns for the town's development. But nobody knows where the money is coming from or going. Do you think Lily knows? Ethan asked. Sophie hesitated. I don't think she does. She's always trusted too easily. But Daniel, he has a way of making people feel dependent on him. I'm afraid she's in too deep to see the truth. Ethan's resolve hardened. We need proof. Something solid to show her. Together, they decided to investigate Daniel's business dealings. Sophie contacted a friend who worked at the town bank, hoping to uncover financial records, while Ethan kept an eye on Daniel's movements. That evening, Ethan saw Daniel leave his home and head toward the edge of town. Following at a safe distance, Ethan found himself near an old warehouse, a place that had been abandoned for years. He crouched behind a stack of crates and watched as Daniel met with the scar-faced man Mr. Grayson had described. Their conversation was tense, filled with sharp whispers and quick glances. Ethan strained to hear. The wedding is in 2 weeks, Daniel said. Once it's done, I'll have access to everything. The scar-faced man sneered. You'd better. No one crosses me and gets away with it. Daniel. Remember that. Ethan's stomach churned. It wasn't just about money. Daniel was using Lily as a pawn in some larger scheme. As the men parted ways, Ethan's phone buzzed. It was Sophie. I've got something, she said urgently. Daniel's accounts show large transfers from an offshore account. He's in deep with dangerous people. Ethan, this isn't just a bad relationship. Lily could be in serious danger. Ethan's heart pounded. He couldn't wait any longer. Lily needed to know the truth now. That night, Ethan found Lily sitting alone on her porch, staring at the stars. She looked lost, her usual spark dimmed. Lily, Ethan said softly, approaching her. She turned, her eyes red from crying. What are you doing here, Ethan? I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen, he said, sitting beside her. This isn't about me trying to come between you and Daniel. This is about your safety. Lily's brows furrowed, but she didn't interrupt. Ethan explained everything. What he'd overheard at the warehouse, Sophie's findings, and the suspicions that had been growing for weeks. Lily shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. This doesn't make sense. Daniel, he's always been kind to me, supportive. Why would he? Because he's not the man you think he is, Ethan interrupted gently. He's using you, Lily. He's manipulating you for his own gain. Lily buried her face in her hands, her sobs breaking the silence. I don't know what to do. I feel so stupid for trusting him. You're not stupid, Ethan said firmly. You're kind, and that's why he targeted you. But it's not too late, Lily. We can stop this before it goes any further. As Ethan reached out to comfort her, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway made them both freeze. They turned to see Daniel stepping out, his face dark with anger. What's going on here? Daniel demanded, his voice cold and sharp. Ethan stood, shielding Lily instinctively. She knows, Daniel. She knows everything. Daniel's smile twisted into a snarl. You have no idea what you've done. The air was thick with tension, the night holding its breath for what would come next. The atmosphere crackled with tension as Daniel stood before them, his cold eyes narrowing. Lily, still seated on the porch steps, clutched her hands together, her breathing uneven. Ethan, determined not to back down, stepped forward, placing himself firmly between Daniel and Lily. She deserves to know the truth, Daniel, Ethan said, his voice steady but edged with defiance. No more lies, no more manipulations. Daniel laughed, but it wasn't a sound of amusement. It was a bitter, hollow sound. Truth? Coming from you, Ethan? You've been trying to sabotage me from the moment you came back. Admit it. You're still in love with her. This isn't about me, Ethan shot back. It's about you and whatever scheme you're running. We both know you're not marrying Lily for love. Daniel's face darkened, the mask of charm he had worn so carefully now slipping completely. You're meddling in things you don't understand. Walk away now, Ethan, and I might forget this ever happened. Ethan took a step closer, his fists clenched at his sides. You can threaten me all you want, but I'm not walking away. I've seen the kind of people you're working with, Daniel. Lily deserves better than to be dragged into your mess. Lily stood suddenly, her voice trembling but firm. Stop it, both of you. She turned to Daniel, her eyes filled with a mixture of hurt and anger. Is it true? Are you using me to cover your tracks? Daniel's expression faltered, a flicker of guilt crossing his face before he regained his composure. Lily, I can explain. Don't, she interrupted, tears streaming down her cheeks. Don't lie to me. Just tell me the truth. Daniel hesitated, the weight of her words bearing down on him. For a moment, it seemed as though he might come clean, but then his gaze hardened. You don't understand what's at stake, he said coldly. Everything I've done has been for us, for a future where we could have everything we ever dreamed of. Lily shook her head, her voice breaking. You don't do this to someone you love, Daniel. You don't manipulate them, lie to them, or put them in harm's way. The sound of a car pulling up to the driveway interrupted the heated exchange. Sophie stepped out, a folder clutched tightly in her hands. She approached quickly, her face determined. I've got everything, Sophie said, handing the folder to Lily. Bank records, deals, everything Daniel's been hiding. Lily opened the folder, her hands trembling as she skimmed the documents. Each page confirmed what Ethan had been saying all along. How could you? She whispered, looking up at Daniel with tear-filled eyes. Daniel took a step toward her, his tone desperate. Lily, listen to me. This doesn't change anything. I still love you. Stop, she said firmly, her voice cutting through his excuses. You don't love me, Daniel. You love what you thought you could gain from me. Ethan placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. You don't have to go through this alone, Lily. We'll figure this out together. Daniel's face twisted with fury. You think you've won, Ethan? You think this makes you the hero? Ethan met his gaze unflinching. It's not about winning. It's about doing what's right. Realizing he had lost, Daniel turned on his heel and stormed back to his car, slamming the door as he drove off into the night. The days that followed were difficult for Lily. She worked with Sophie to unravel the financial mess Daniel had left behind, and began rebuilding her life. Through it all, Ethan remained by her side, offering support but never pushing for more. One quiet evening, as they sat on the porch, Lily turned to Ethan with a soft smile. "You've always been there for me, haven't you?" Ethan shrugged, his expression warm but humble. "I'd do it all over again if it meant seeing you happy." For the first time in what felt like forever, Lily felt a glimmer of hope. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain. She would face it on her own terms, surrounded by people who truly cared for her. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Ethan and Lily sat in comfortable silence, knowing that, no matter what came next, they had found a sense of peace. Sometimes, love doesn't mean holding on. It means letting go of what hurts us to make room for something better. Lily's journey wasn't just about uncovering Daniel's betrayal. It was about rediscovering her own strength and the value of true, selfless support.